The sun had only just emerged behind the mountaintops when a messenger brought word to Tadakatsu that Hideyoshi's forces were on the march. He had a hard time believing it. After such a long period of nothing ever happening, could the Toyotomi be finally making a move? Yet what he was now seeing with his own two eyes from the battlements was just what the messenger had described. Thousands of Hideyoshi's forces were moving to the east. And there, amongst the horsemen, he saw a large helmet, decorated with the golden rays of the sun, that unmistakably belonged to Hideyoshi himself. In Tadakatsu's mind, there was no doubt that this large host, led by the Toyotomi daimyo, was going after the army of his own lord, Ieyasu. He gave the order for his men to assemble, and then made his way to his own room, where his armor and weapons were waiting. He donned his helmet, decorated with deer antlers that made him stand out on the battlefield, and picked up his spear, the tombokiri, a famed weapon, said to be able to slice a dragonfly that landed on its tip. Tadakatsu would not sit idle in a castle while history would be written a few miles away. He would not sit idle while his lord needed him the most. With that thought, he walked to the door. This video is sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons, who get 2 exclusive videos weekly, not available anywhere else, for their kind support of our channel. You can join their ranks to watch more than 160 videos, including our series on the Pacific War, Punic Wars, Persian Wars, Spanish War of Succession, Russo-Japanese War, North African Campaign of World War II, History of Prussia, Italian Unification Wars, Risorgimento, Albigensian Crusades, and much more. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to get the exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, our schedule, wallpapers, access to a special Discord server where we're very active, and much more. Thanks for supporting us, we couldn't be doing it without your help. In the previous episode, we saw how Toyotomi Hideyoshi avenged the death of his daimyo by defeating Akechi Mitsuhide in Yamazaki and triumphantly winning over the Shibata Oda bloc. Despite these successes, Hideyoshi's ascension was not yet complete. The strongest contender to Hideyoshi's hegemony in central Honshu, Tokugawa Ieyasu, had yet to play his cards. However, over the course of the next few months, that would change. Following his victory at Shizukatake, Hideyoshi returned to Osaka to oversee the final touches upon his magnificent new residence. With this new castle completed, Hideyoshi extended invitations to various high-ranking samurai generals and lords, like Chosokabe Motochika, Kobayakawa Tagakage, and the late dictator's son Oda Nobunaga, to visit him. These, however, were not merely friendly social calls. At first glance, Hideyoshi's invitations looked like a nice, friendly move to celebrate a great victory, but it was nothing less than Hideyoshi asking for homage. In the case of Nobunaga, it also meant the reversal of the master-vassal relationship between them. The Oda Lord would have to pledge allegiance to his former Ashigaru, an idea that Nobunaga could not entertain in the slightest. Nobunaga naturally declined the invitation, which led to the two men falling out. Seeking to alienate Nobunaga from his closest supporters, Hideyoshi extended grace to 3 of Nobukatsu's chief retainers, Sugawa Yoshifuyu, Okada Shigetaka, and Azai Nagatoki. However, Nobunaga caught wind of the relations between the 3 men and Hideyoshi, and promptly had them recalled to his castle and executed. Suspicious of his longtime allies, and lacking the strength to confront Hideyoshi alone, the Oda Lord then turned to Tokugawa Ieyasu for help. Ieyasu, who had been a cautious man all his life, knew that facing Hideyoshi was madness. Still, Nobukatsu's plea presented a perfect excuse for war with Hideyoshi, and if he played his cards right, he could become the absolute authority in the land. Hideyoshi tried in vain to bribe Ieyasu by offering lordship over the provinces of Mino and Owari, but the Tokugawa daimyo declined. All-out war between the two men was now inevitable. Ieyasu moved quickly, trying to bring to his camp those former retainers of Nobunaga who now stood on the fence. He called for Sasa Narimasa of Echu province to attack Hideyoshi's steadfast ally and one of the 4 Karo, Niwa Nagahide, who governed Kaga and Echizen provinces. He also invited Chosokabe Motochika, ruler of all Shikoku, to hit Hideyoshi from across the sea in his exposed soft underbelly. Finally, he asked various warrior monk sects to lend him their strength. Nobunaga, meanwhile, reached out to Ikeda Tsuneyoki, the other Karo, whose family had served the Oda clan for generations, even releasing Tsuneyoki's hostage son as a sign of good faith. However, Tsuneyoki owed a great deal to Hideyoshi, and was thus conflicted as to which side to pick. when a messenger from Osaka arrived bearing the words of Hideyoshi that promised to make Tsuneyoki the lord of Mino and Owari. The latter wholeheartedly threw his lot in with the Toyotomi. Furthermore, Hideyoshi secured the support of Uesugi Kagekatsu, whose position threatened the rear of Ieyasu's ally Sasanarimasa should he make a move. Others that stood behind Toyotomi's Golden Gourd banner were various lords of Ise and Iga provinces, Bizen, Mimisaka, and Tengo. In Ise and Owari, Nobukatsu had made the first moves by securing the castles of the retainers he had executed and then capturing Kamiyama on the 22nd of April. The very next day, Hideyoshi's generals tried in vain to reclaim it by launching a frontal assault, so they settled in for a siege while at the same time attacking Mine Castle, which would fall just 2 days later. Meanwhile, Ieyasu's forces marched from Mikawa to meet up with Nobukatsu's forces in Kyosu Castle on the 23rd. However, Hideyoshi's allies in the area had already made a move as Ikeda Tsuneyoki captured the nearby castle of Inuyama. Inuyama nominally belonged to Nobukatsu and was governed by Nakagawa Sadanari, who had chosen a really bad time to be absent at Ise. Taking advantage of Sadanari's absence, Tsuneyoki's men marched from Okaki Castle and laid a brief siege at Inuyama. Tsuneyoki, who had served as castellan of the place during Nobunaga's time, was familiar with the castle's defenses. Moreover, when some of the defenders recognized their old commander, they assisted him in breaching the castle walls and capturing the main keep. Following the capture of Inuyama, Mori Nagayoshi moved towards Hoguru Castle with 3,000 men. He was a well-connected commander, being Tsuneyoki's son-in-law, a brother to Ranmaru, and having served as Nobunaga's page during the events of Honnoji. However, Ieyasu was prepared for him. Having anticipated such a movement, the Tokugawa lord had already left Kyosu. He set up camp at Koyakiyama, a hill that would grant him a significant tactical advantage in the coming battle. At dawn, Ieyasu's generals, Matsudaira Ietada and Okudaira Nobumasa, launched an attack at Nagayoshi's headquarters at Hachimanbayashi, with heavy arquebus fire being exchanged between the two sides before the melee clash. At the same time, after being granted permission by his overlord, Sakai Tadatsugu made a wide flanking maneuver and attacked Nagayoshi's forces in the rear, inflicting terrible losses. However, the Mori general managed to break through the encirclement and escape. An attempt to change the outcome from Tsuneyoki was made by dispatching reinforcements to Hogaru. But Ieyasu met those troops by relocating his own. The leader of the Ikeda regiment, Inaba Itetsu, preferred to avoid combat and didn't commit, so Ieyasu also pulled back to reinforce and fortify his position at Komaki-Yama. Ieyasu's men began repairing the half-destroyed castle that was built during Nobunaga's time, as well as the nearby Hira and Kobata castles. They also dug trenches and other earthworks and constructed a long palisade wall that stretched about half a mile from Komaki-Yama to Hachimanzuka. While Ieyasu was building up his defenses at Komaki-Yama, Toyotomi Hideyoshi decided to personally enter the stage, leaving Sakamoto Castle for Gifu with 25,000 men, before proceeding on to Inuyama, which he reached on the 7th of May. There, Hideyoshi was educated on the tactical situation on the front, which he later assessed for himself by overlooking Ieyasu's fortifications from some hills. Despite the Toyotomi alliance having a massive numerical advantage over Ieyasu, as the combined strength of their armies more than doubled that of the Tokugawa camp, Hideyoshi decided that the Tokugawa defenses were too strong to risk a direct assault, and opted to build his own line of fortifications linking 3 forts with a rampart that stretched over 2 kilometers long and 4 meters high. He then set up his headquarters at Gakuden and waited for Ieyasu to make a move. But on the other side of the 2 fence lines, the Tokugawa lord had the same idea, and was waiting for Hideyoshi to come at him, knowing the defender would enjoy a significant advantage in the upcoming battle. And so the 2 sides waited for each other, with neither army emerging to challenge the other. This continued until, seemingly out of boredom, Ikeda Tsuneyoki suggested raiding Mikawa province, the home province of the Tokugawa clan, to force Ieyasu to abandon his fortified position. Even if Ieyasu didn't leave Komiyakama entirely, he would surely have to send part of his army back to Mikawa, thus weakening his defenses substantially enough for Hideyoshi to attempt to overwhelm them with a frontal assault. Hideyoshi gave his permission. Thus, Ikeda Tsuneyoki embarked with his son-in-law, Mori Nagayoshi, as well as Hori Hidemasa and Hideyoshi's nephew, Miyoshi Hidesugu. Under cover of darkness, and with around 20,000 men under their combined command, they left the Toyotomi camp on the 15th of May, and after crossing the Shonai and Yada rivers, they arrived at the area of Nagakute 3 days later, where they came face to face with their first obstacle, the castle of Iwasaki. The castle was commanded by Niwa Ujishige, who had no more than 240 men to garrison its defences and could not hope to resist the enemy force. Yet Ujishige would not go down without a fight, hoping to at least delay the Toyotomi forces enough for a messenger to reach Ieyasu and warn him of the invading force that had penetrated so deep into his defensive lines. Despite Ujishige's valiant efforts, Tsuneyoki's raiding force achieved a quick victory and continued on. However, the sounds of the battle alarmed the local peasants, who hurried to inform Lord Tokugawa. While Ieyasu was at first reluctant to believe the words of the farmers, reports of his own scout that confirmed Tsuneyoki's flanking maneuver convinced him to take action. Thus, Ieyasu left Sakai Tadatsugu, Ishikawa Kazumasa, and Honda Tadakatsu with 5,000 men at Komaki to deter any move on Hideyoshi's part. Ieyasu himself took 11,000 men, including Sakakibara Yasumasa, Ii Naomasa, and Oda Nobunaga, and made his way to Kashiwai. Ahead of the main force marched his uncle, Mizuno Tadashige, at the head of the vanguard consisting of around 4,500 soldiers, with orders to hold down the enemy if they engaged in battle or to pursue them further into Mikawa. After reaching Kobata, Tadashige continued to attack Hidetsugu's rear, while Yasumasa followed a different route, essentially forming a pincer move that not only enveloped Hidetsugu's forces, but also caught them completely by surprise while the soldiers were taking their breakfast. Miyoshi's forces were routed from the battlefield, with Hideyoshi's nephew himself barely managing to escape the ensuing onslaught. The sound of the battle alarmed Hori Hidemasa's nearby troops upon the arrival of the Tokugawa armies. Hidemasa rallied his 3,000 men to come to Hidetsugu's rescue, but it was already too late. Therefore, he chose to position his regiment on a hill that overlooked the Kanare River near the village of Nagakute. There he prepared for the oncoming Tokugawa forces, offering 100 koku to any man who would shoot down a cavalryman. Soon enough, Sakakibara's troops came marching towards them, fresh from their victory over Miyoshi's division. They confidently attacked Hidemasa's position, but they were met with a devastating hailstorm of arrows and arquebus fire that broke their charge. The Hori forces then counterattacked and completely broke the morale of Sakakibara's men, who fell back and only recovered when they saw Ieyasu's own golden fan banner approaching. But Ieyasu wasn't the only one joining the battle. By that time, news of their detection by their enemy had reached the ears of Ikeda Tsuneyoki and Mori Nagayoshi, who turned around their divisions to join Hori Hidemasa's forces at Nagakute. Tsuneyoki's two sons, Terumasa and Motosuke, positioned their forces on the right wing, with their father staying behind in the reserve, while Nagayoshi secured the left flank. Opposite him, on the right wing of his own line, stood Tokugawa Ieyasu himself, while Ii Naomasa and his Red Demons were guarding the left flank, and Oda Nobunaga remained in the reserves. The battle started with the arquebusiers of both sides exchanging heavy fire, which inflicted significant casualties on Ikeda's men, and prompted his sons on the right flank to launch a head-on attack against Naomasa's men. However, the Red Demons proved more than a match for them, and were able to repel several assaults even when they were reinforced with forces drawn from Ikeda's center. Seeing the center of Ikeda's formation weakening, Ieyasu, who by that point had not yet moved, advanced on Nagayoshi's troops from the right flank. The two forces clashed fiercely, and in the ensuing combat, Nagayoshi lost his life to one of Tokugawa's arquebusiers, who was able to spot him due to his distinct armor. With Ikeda's left wing firmly tied by Ieyasu's own men, Nobunaga, who was still sitting in the reserve, made a wide flanking maneuver and fell upon Tsuneyoki's regiment. In the frenzied melee, the Ikeda daimyo followed his son-in-law to the grave by the hands of a samurai named Nagai Denpachiro. His death caused a massive loss of morale to his troops, who began routing en masse. In the slaughter that followed, Tsuneyoki's eldest son, Motosuke, also perished. Soon enough, news of the battle reached Hideyoshi's ears at Inuyama, and he made haste with a large host to reinforce his generals at Nagakute. Seeing the Toyotomi's defenses weaken from their own fortifications at Komaki, Ieyasu's generals held a gathering, but could not agree on a common course of action. Sakai Tadatsugu supported a direct attack on the Toyotomi positions, which Ishikawa Kazumasa vehemently opposed. At the same time, Honda Tadakatsu refused to sit idle. Leaping into action, he gathered a regiment of around 1,000 samurai and set off to attack Hideyoshi's rear. He was, however, unable to find an opening, and luckily for him, Hideyoshi preferred to continue marching instead of engaging Tadakatsu's force. Even so, the Toyotomi reinforcements arrived at Kabata too late to change the outcome of the battle, and Ieyasu was already safe inside the castle. Another stalemate like the one at Komaki played out, with both sides staring menacingly at each other behind their respective palisades. After 3 weeks, Hideyoshi finally lost his patience and withdrew completely, leaving only a small garrison force around Inuyama Castle. Ieyasu too, despite having achieved a victory on the battlefield, decided to return to Okazaki. However, the absence of the Tokugawa soldiers from the front lines gave Hideyoshi essentially a blank check to do as he pleased with the other member of the Oda Tokugawa alliance, Nobukatsu. Thus, the Toyotomi armies went on the offensive, immediately besieging and capturing Kagenoi Castle to the northwest of Kyosu. Following that, Hideyoshi attacked the castle at Takegehana, which he captured after a month-long siege, during which he diverted the flow of the Kiso River in a move that echoed his previous triumph at Takematsu. Oku was next in line, and after that, Hideyoshi proceeded to return back to his home in Osaka, leaving behind his generals to continue their attacks on Nobukatsu's strongholds, who was safe inside his headquarters at Nagashima, but also unable to stop the rampaging Toyotomi troops. The epilogue to the campaign came when Hideyoshi's general, Takigawa Kazematsu, successfully convinced his cousin, Maeda Tanetoshi, to surrender the castle of Kanie, which lay halfway between Kyosu and Nagashima, and posed a substantial threat to Nobukatsu's position. The fall of Kanie also led to the capture of the nearby and smaller Taba Castle. Kazematsu's spree continued with the attempted conquest of Ono, but this was unsuccessful. Wary of the threat the Toyotomi forces posed, Nobukatsu appealed for help to Ieyasu, who dispatched Sakakibara Yasumasa to relieve his ailing ally. Kanie and the surrounding castles soon came under siege by the combined Tokugawa and Oda forces, which were led by Nobukatsu's uncle Oda Nobunaga. On the 23rd of June, after an exhausting siege, Kazematsu was able to strike a deal with the besiegers, who agreed to let the garrison go unharmed in exchange for his cousin's head. And so poor Tanetoshi paid the price for betraying his lord, and with his head, Kanie returned to Oda control. This was the final action of the Komaki-Nagakute campaign, as Hideyoshi, upon seeing the reversal of the situation on the field, resorted to diplomacy. As castles and lands changed hands, and as each side exchanged hostages, an uneasy peace was concluded. Ieyasu had prevailed on the battlefield, and on the tactical level he was victorious. Yet his wins had not been translated into gaining him anything on the strategic level. If anything, Hideyoshi had emerged more powerful, as his hegemony continued to solidify, and with Ieyasu out of the picture, he was now free to pursue other goals and further conquests, such as the destruction of the Iko-Iki at Nigoriji, the pacification of Sasanarimasa in Echu, and the subjugation of Shikoku and Kyushu Islands. We will cover those battles to come in our next episode on the Sengoku Jidai. To ensure that you don't miss it, please consider liking, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our videos would not be possible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.